All right. Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today we're tackling a case that's really gripped true crime fans. The Alyssa Turney case.
Yeah.
It's got so many twists and turns.
Yeah.
And of course, the recent acquittal of her father, Michael Turney.
Right.
But what makes this one super interesting is that we're hearing it straight from Alyssa's sister, Sarah Turney.
Absolutely.
She's been fighting for justice since she was just a kid, which is just incredible to me.
It really is. You know, you think about being 12 years old and taking it upon yourself to make flyers.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Build websites, and eventually launch a whole podcast, Voices for Justice,
Yeah.
dedicated to making sure missing persons aren't forgotten. That's Sarah.
That is Sarah.
Yeah.
And that podcast is actually where we're getting all this inside info.
Right.
She did this interview where she talks about what it was like behind the scenes of the trial.
Wow.
And some of this stuff is, well, it's unbelievable. Like, the prosecution pretty much kept her in the dark
Really?
about their whole strategy. They said it was to protect her.
Okay.
But I don't know about that. What do you think?
I mean, it does make you wonder, right?
Yeah.
Where's the line between protecting someone and making sure they're in the loop?
Especially when it's their own family member we're talking about.
Exactly. And it seems like that lack of communication really backfired. Sarah felt like the prosecution was unprepared.
Total.
Almost like they didn't really get all the work Sarah had done, all the complexities she had uncovered over the years.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting and honestly a little frustrating.
Uh-oh.
Sarah helped find all this potential evidence, like game-changing stuff.
Wow.
But a lot of it wasn't used, or the court said it was inadmissible. Can you break down inadmissible for folks who might not be familiar with the legal terms?
Sure. So inadmissible basically means the judge decided the jury couldn't see that evidence.
Okay.
There are all these rules about what you can and can't use in a trial.
Oh, right.
Sometimes, even if the evidence seems important, it gets tossed out for different reasons.
I see.
Maybe how it was collected, or if it's reliable, or even if it could, unfairly sway the jury.
Gotcha. So you have this potential evidence, but it's off limits.
Right.
And this happened with a bunch of things Sarah found. Like her brother, John. He was ready to testify about the $300 mentioned in Alyssa's note, which was a huge part of the case, but they never called him to the stand.
That's strange. Why wouldn't they want that testimony? It's puzzling.
Right. And then there's this recording Sarah had of a conversation with her dad,
Okay.
where he actually suggests confessing in exchange for lethal injection.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's bombshell stuff.
Yeah, a statement like that, straight from the defendant, that could really impact a jury.
They fought so hard to get it allowed in court, and then, get this, they didn't even play it. It's like having a smoking gun and deciding, I'll just leave it in my pocket.
It's truly bizarre. What was the prosecution thinking? Was there something they weren't telling us?
It's baffling. And it wasn't just family members either.
Sure.
There was Shay Masterson, a childhood friend of Alyssa's, who said she saw Michael Turney physically abusing Alyssa.
That's important because it shows a pattern, right? If they could prove a history of abuse, it really strengthens the case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they barely even tried to get her testimony admitted. It's like they went into the trial with one hand tied behind their back.
Wow.
And in the end, the judge didn't even need to hear the defense's side.
Oh, wow.
They acquitted Michael Turney right there.
It's pretty unusual, isn't it, for a judge to do that before the defense even gets to say their piece?
Yeah, it is. And here's the thing. No new evidence led to Michael Turney's arrest in the first place. It was all the public pressure Sarah created over the years through her activism.
That's what happens when you keep raising awareness, right? She basically forced law enforcement's hand.
Right.
They had to act because Sarah kept Alyssa's story alive in the public eye for so long. But then the case falls apart in court.
It's heartbreaking.
Devastating.
It really is.
I can't imagine what that must have felt like for her.
And it gets even wilder. Right before the trial started, Sarah had this meeting with the prosecution, and they basically admitted things weren't looking good.
Oh, no.
And then, get this, they told her about this woman who had recently come forward, saying Michael Turney had sexually assaulted her.
Wow, if that's true, that really fits a pattern, doesn't it?
Right. Especially with everything Sarah had already found about her dad's alleged actions toward women in their family.
It's disturbing.
You'd think this would be a big break in the case, but they told Sarah it was too late to use it as evidence.
Too late. How can it be too late?
I know, right? She kept hearing it's too late about all this potential evidence, even though she'd been giving them this information for years.
That's so frustrating. It makes you wonder about the whole investigation, you know? Why wasn't this stuff looked into earlier?
I know. Did they just not believe her? Was there some miscommunication?
It's hard to say, but the timing definitely seems off.
It does. And Sarah was basically hitting a wall everywhere she turned. Like, she did all this work, found all these puzzle pieces, and then they couldn't figure out how to put them together.
It's like having all the ingredients for a cake but not knowing how to bake.
Exactly. And you know what? Sarah actually agreed with the judge's decision. She felt like the prosecution just didn't build a strong enough case.
Wow, that's a pretty big statement coming from someone who's dedicated so much of her life to getting justice for her sister.
Right. It really shows that it wasn't just about the evidence itself, but how it was presented, the whole story they built around it.
Yeah, the narrative is so important.
But here's the thing that I find truly amazing. After all this, after this huge setback, Sarah actually found a sense of peace.
Really? How is that even possible?
I know, right? But she described it like this weight being lifted off her shoulders. And when you think about it, it makes sense. She's been carrying this burden for over 20 years, fighting for Alyssa since she was a child herself.
I can't even imagine the emotional toll that must have taken.
It's got to be immense. And she made this really insightful point. She said, finding Alyssa's remains wouldn't actually bring her closure.
That's a powerful realization.
It is. She said she already knows the truth in her heart.
So it's about coming to terms with that truth, even if you don't have all the answers.
Exactly. It's about knowing you did everything you could, and Sarah has. She's been relentless in her pursuit of justice, and she's accepted that some questions may always remain unanswered.
So what's next for Sarah?
Well, she's calling it her Sarah era, a time for healing and rediscovering herself.
I love that. She deserves it after all these years.
She does. But that doesn't mean she's going silent. She's still committed to advocacy and plans to finish telling Alyssa's story through her podcast. She's going to share everything that hasn't been revealed yet.
Oh, wow. I bet there's a lot we haven't heard.
I think so, too, especially with how much she's held back to protect the case. This is like a whole new chapter about to unfold.
And what about her message for other families going through similar situations?
It's powerful. Don't give up, especially when you consider how Michael Turney was arrested in the first place. It wasn't new evidence. It was the pressure from Sarah's campaigning. It shows what can happen when you refuse to let a case be forgotten.
It's a testament to the impact one person can have.
It really is. But it's also a reminder that the legal system isn't perfect. It can be flawed. And sometimes, even with everyone's best efforts, the outcome isn't what we hope for.
That's true, but it doesn't mean the fight was for nothing.
Absolutely.
Right.
Sarah's work has brought Alyssa's case to national attention, and that's huge. It keeps the conversation going, raises awareness about missing persons, and encourages other families to keep fighting.
So where does all this leave us?
Well, that leads to a bigger question. Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing. Even after everything, she's helping others,
Right.
Her podcast, Voices for Justice, it's not just about Alyssa's story anymore.
It's become bigger than that.
Way bigger. She's giving a voice to so many families going through the same struggles.
Wow. And what's the message she's sending?
Don't be afraid. Yeah. Don't let the system shut you down. Even when it feels impossible, keep pushing.
Because it can feel impossible, can it? The justice system.
Especially when you're already dealing with so much grief and loss, it can be overwhelming.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how Sarah's own efforts to raise awareness, it's been a double-edged sword in a way.
What do you mean?
Well, the public pressure she created, it led to her father's arrest.
Right.
But now he's using the media to tell his side of the story.
I bet that's infuriating.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's trying to control the narrative, putting his own spin on everything.
It happens a lot, unfortunately. The legal system doesn't always capture the whole truth, and public perception can be, manipulated.
Yeah, it makes you think about the power of the media and how easily things can get twisted.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to hear what Sarah reveals in the upcoming episodes of her podcast. She's been holding back to protect the case. But now, it seems like she's ready to share more. She hinted at having details about her father's arrest, the lead up to the trial. And I'm sure she'll address his recent media appearances, too.
I'm sure she will. It'll be fascinating to finally hear her perspective, everything she's been keeping quiet about.
If you've been following this case, Voices for Justice is a must-listen. You hear straight from Sarah, her investigation, the emotions. It's powerful stuff.
But it's not just about Alyssa's case, right? There's a bigger picture here.
Definitely. It's about all the missing persons out there. And the families fighting for answers.
We need to be more aware, more supportive.
Sarah's story shows us that even when the legal system fails, the fight for justice keeps going.
It's about resilience, about love. It's about never forgetting.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it leaves us with this question. What does Sarah's story tell us about the role of the media and public pressure in seeking justice?
That's a big one. It's something for all of us to think about.
It really is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep the conversation going.